Kitco Mining's special coverage of Gold Forum Americas is brought to you by Metalla Royalty.
The joy of growing a gold company as the gold price grows. I'm Paul Harris of Kitco Mining at the 2024 Gold Forum Americas in Colorado Springs. And joining me today to discuss this is Jason Simpson, President and CEO of Orla Mining.
Thanks for having me, Paul.
Welcome to Kitco, excellent. Now, before we get into the meat of our conversation, let's start with a company update. You're producing gold at the Camino Rojo project, the mine in Mexico, and you're growing your production there. What are your production plans for this year and next with the oxide laybacks, sulphides?
Sure thing, yeah. So we've guided this year to 120 to 130,000 ounces, and importantly to an all-in sustaining cost of between $800 and $900 an ounce. So that makes us one of the lowest cost gold producers in the mine. And in a rising gold price environment, we've been able to add a lot to the cash balance, as well as pay down debt on a more accelerated rate. In terms of our growth in the future, we will continue to harvest the oxide mine to its completion and likely expand the company into Nevada. We purchased an asset in 2022, a replica of our Camino Rojo asset. We will be able to double our cash production through the construction of that asset, and that's the next leg of growth for Orla. And we can talk about returning to Mexico as the next step. After the two oxide mines are built, that doubling of cash production, we are starting to design the sulphide project below our oxide mine in Mexico, and we're excited about the organic growth prospects that we have.
You've been having quite a lot of exploration success at Camino Rojo, as you said, getting down under that pit and the structure continuing. Yeah. What's the potential timeline on producing from that? Sure.
So the first thing we knew when we acquired the asset back in 2017 is that we had 15 million gold equivalent ounces to work with. A portion of that, the first 2 million ounces, i.e. scratching the surface, was this oxide mine that'll last for 10 years that we're talking about. But beneath it, you know, another grouping of resources in a sulphide format that we could develop as well. So we're excited to continue harvesting the oxide ounces to begin the company and design the sulphide mine, which you've asked about. And I'll separate that from the second thing, which is the new discoveries, which is an entirely new zone below the sulphide resource. So below the oxide mine, we've got 7.5 million ounces of sulphide resources that we're designing now. In terms of the timeline to bring that into production, we have spent the last 3 years drilling it. We will produce a resource for that underground development by the end of this year, leading to the initial engineering next year so that we can be driving a ramp into that sulphide resource by the year 2026, subject to permitting. That would put the whole sulphide development into production by the end of this decade. Now, additionally and separately from what you described, we've also discovered more. When we were drilling the higher grade portion of that sulphide resource, we discovered a new zone, a zone that we're calling Zone 22. So this is below the known resource. This is below any previous discoveries. We've been able to intercept higher grade gold along with material amounts of silver, zinc, and copper. So that will represent an additional value creator in that eventual sulphide project. So we're very excited about that leg of growth for Orla, which will come after our growth into Nevada.
Now, Mexico is going to have a new president in about 2 weeks' time. Claudia Sheinbaum takes office on the 1st of October, if I'm not mistaken. Recent months, there's been a lot of noise out of Mexico about potential open pit mining ban. Can you sort of cut through that noise for us and give us some color as to what's actually going on?
Well, the first thing to understand in the Orla story is we have a permitted open pit mine that we are currently extracting our gold from. We understand that our ability to expand that pit could be affected by any changes in the regulations. So we're working with the upcoming administration, as we worked with the previous administration, to make sure that our mine can continue until it's fully exhausted. In the case of our sulphide development, that's a different type of mine, an underground mine, so we'll be able to move into that consistent with the with all of the things that are being discussed. To cut through it, I would offer the following. I think that this party, the Morena Party, has perspectives on how resources need to be responsibly developed. I would offer that our perspectives on that are shared with them. Things need to be done in an environmentally responsible manner, need to be socially beneficial, and a net positive to the country. And so we're certainly aligned with that. We look forward to not only mining the resources that we have through our open pit and underground projects in Mexico, but potentially expanding in Mexico. I've been in Mexico for 10 years, permitted and constructed 2 mines in that time, and would like to grow our business in Mexico. And should the business conditions continue to be favorable in the future, we will certainly expand our interests in Mexico. And working with the upcoming Sheinbaum administration is going to be an important part of our business.
Okay, thank you, Jason. Now, you mentioned that Camino Rojo is a very low-cost mine at an industry level. So with the gold price hitting $2,600 per ounce, US dollars per ounce, the cash flow generation there, I imagine, is considerable. So how is that changing your views on capital allocation, your priorities, the things that you can perhaps do today that you couldn't have done a year or 2 ago?
Yeah, I think it's accelerated some of the capital allocation conversations. Yeah, at $800 to $900 all in, we are accumulating cash at a pace not even we had planned for. And so we need to consider the pace of construction, making sure that we can self-fund not only construction but exploration for the company in all the countries where we operate. But on top of that, we have some other abilities to pay down debt faster, which will be our first priority. And then the newest conversation from our shareholders is, would we be considering returning some of that to our shareholders? And we are discussing that with our board, and that will be something that we hope to graduate to in the future, recognizing that the large portion of our shareholders are invested in us to grow their benefit through finding more gold and constructing mines to produce more gold. So that'll be our first priority. We think we can do both. We think we can grow our gold discovery, grow our gold production, and at the right time consider returning some to investors so that they have multiple value creation streams when they invest in Orla.
Now, most investors in gold companies, I would imagine, want exposure, full exposure to the gold price. With that in mind, why do you think gold producers hold cash on their balance sheet rather than gold? Did you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think most gold producers try to deploy their cash in a responsible way, attending to their debt, improving their balance sheet, making sure that they save sufficient cash for future growth projects that they have in their pipeline. Most gold companies, and ours would be one of those, intentionally grow our pipeline and would use that cash to grow the value of the business by growing our gold production, grow the value in the business by making new discoveries. So we need to save sufficient cash to do that on our own. And then additional cash that is past paying down debt and offering dividends, I think the investors would first look to us to deploy the cash to grow the business. And then if we can't grow the business, they would look for us to return the cash to them. And if we don't do that, then we could have other discussions about holding commodity and different strategies to continue to give them exposure to the gold. But I think our first priority is to find ways to deploy our cash into gold construction, gold exploration, so that they have the benefit of that kind of gold exposure. If they want to buy physical gold, I would certainly recommend they do that as well.
Okay, now we've spoken a little bit about growing your business in Mexico at Camino Rojo. As you mentioned earlier, you've also got the properties you got from Gold Standard Ventures, with an acquisition there in Nevada. You bought those in 2022, if I remember correctly. You recently added to that land position. What's the plan there? How's the exploration and development plan advancing?
Thanks for asking that. That acquisition in 2022, you're right, of Gold Standard Venture is our growth that'll come next. So first and foremost, we bought a company that had another oxide project, and as I've described with Camino Rojo, these are high margin, low complexity projects, and we want to replicate that in our acquisition in Nevada. So the first thing we got was another oxide project that we're currently permitting and will construct next. As I mentioned, that will double our cash flow generation from the company. We also knew when we acquired that project that we got 22,000 hectares in the South Carlin Trend. That is, the optionality of that kind of land package in that location is tremendous. With our balance sheet, we're able to explore that ground and add oxide and sulphide resources, more gold. So to exemplify how excited we are about the prospects and what we've already discovered, we made another acquisition of Contact Gold just to the south of us, owned a land package, and we only spent $8 million to do that. All of that added up is that our assets have the tremendous cash generation of the oxide projects, have the future prospects of the sulphide resources that are on both projects in Mexico and Nevada. And finally, 140,000 hectares in Mexico will generate greater exploration success, and the 25,000 hectares that we have in Nevada will generate exploration success. So the Orla shareholder gets the benefit of cash generation, growth through our gold resources, and on any day, the chance of an exploration success if we discover a new deposit on either of our properties.
How close are you to a potential construction decision in Nevada? What are the things you need to put in place to get there?
So we are in the permitting process right now. We have completed 15 of the 19 required reports for that permitting process. We will be permitting through next year so that we are constructing in 2026, producing in 2027. Ideally, we'll have cash production out of both Camino Rojo and South Railroad in 2027.
Now, one property in your pipeline you've had a bit of a reverse on, and that's Cerro Quema in Panama. What's the status of that? Has that effectively been taken away from you by the government? Are you able to potentially get that back?
Yeah, so we've shelved all investment in Panama, so we're not expending any money in Panama until the business conditions improve. We are in the process of an international arbitration over that asset in Panama. Our claim amount is $400 million. We are open to a discussion with the Panamanian government about our asset in Panama. The new president who took office this year is going to work with the big mine in the country, First Quantum's Cobre Panama, and we expect that we'll likely be part of that discussion as well. So our only efforts in Panama are legal at this time. We'll have to see what happens in the future, and at the end of it is, long-dated optionality at the very least.
Okay. Orla is a story that seems to really resonate with investors, and I think it's fair to say you enjoy a relative market capitalization superior to a lot of your sort of peer group. With your paper so highly valued, you've done a number of transactions in the past. With your paper so highly valued, is this a good market for you to be looking to acquire other people, using that, leveraging that to get other assets for your pipeline? Yeah,
I would offer our shares are fairly valued, but to your question about utilizing that for the purposes of acquisition, we have a lot to work on internally. We have to build the project in Nevada next. We have to plan and build the sulphide project in Mexico after that. So we have plenty to work on. But I would offer, are very well informed of the opportunities in the market, but we're also very judicious in selecting acquisitions. We've only done one in the last 6 years of material nature. That was GSV in 2022. We're looking for the right combination of quality and price that can make sure that the investors are rewarded by any acquisition steps we take. And so we'll be very selective in the acquisition space, but that could certainly form part of the value creation for Orla shareholders going forward. In addition to the methodical construction and operation of our assets, if we can add acquisitions that create value for them, we'll certainly consider that.
Now, with the we've seen a couple of big transactions recently. How do you think the sector is shaping up from an M&A perspective? Do you expect to see a lot more? And if so, what kind of transactions do you think there will be?
Yeah, I think consolidation would be appropriate in our space. I think that forming larger, stronger companies is to the shareholders' best interest, and I think all of us who work for public companies have a responsibility to try and create greater value for them. And if M&A transaction does that, then all of us should be considering that. And I hope that in the very healthy gold price environment that we have, that all of my peers are considering how they can do a better job and add value for shareholders. And M&A is certainly one of that. Why? Because it creates geographic diversification, it creates strength on the balance sheet, and creates greater pipelines for companies. It just makes stronger companies more valuable companies for investors, and it's our job to create greater value for investors. And Orla is happy to be a part of that process.
Now, the gold price has increased, let's say, $500, $600 per ounce this year. But when you look at share price gains across the sector year to date, there's quite a disparity. Some companies are up 50 to 60%. Yeah. Some companies are quite flat. Do you think that the difference there will help facilitate or provoke transactions?
It could certainly. We will all look at each other on a relative basis, and presuming that we're all trading in about the same relative space, then really not much has changed. The gold price has changed, but I have not seen an equivalent move in the equity, to your point. And so really, not sure that drives any increase in the M&A transaction. People may have more cash on their balance sheet. That might drive certain things, but hopefully the companies like Orla can deploy their cash into growing the company. I'm not sure depressed equity prices necessarily spurs M&A. I think M&A is spurred by each company reflecting on the value they can create for investors, which would intimate that there should be investors that would be rewarding companies for good, smart M&A transactions. We haven't seen that yet. Once we see an increase in the M&A landscape, perhaps, and we see some investor reward for those behaviors, then yes. Then we can expect that there will be an increase because people know that this is what investors are looking for.
Okay. Looking forward, how do you see Orla, or perhaps better said, what do you want Orla to look like in 3 to 5 years' time?
Yeah, so we have a plan out to 2030, which began in 2019 when I joined the company, and the plan for the decade at that point was always to grow Orla to a gold production company in the mid-tier space with over 500,000 ounces of production at good margins like we have today, with diversification across multiple jurisdictions. So that will translate into 3 to 4 operating assets, 1 development asset at any given time, and a pipeline of exploration to support the continuation. That's the ambition for Orla by 2030, and I think we're well on the way to creating that kind of value.
Okay. And how do you think the rest of the year is going to play out in the gold space?
So in the gold space, my prediction is that with the changes to the interest rates and particularly the announcements in the US, that's going to be a healthier environment for the gold price. In the gold space, I hope that we see some transactions that you described be rewarded by investors, and that could spur additional M&A action, because I think that's healthy for the business. I think that those of us who are making our own cash can invest more in exploration, and we can get some new discoveries. I would like to see more investment in the junior space, as we know that's the ecosystem that creates projects for companies like ours. So hopefully that can improve as well, and there's more money flowing to the junior explorers, which creates a fertile environment for us in the future. From Orla's perspective, we've increased our production guidance, lowered our cost guidance. We're very comfortable the position Orla's in, and next year it should be more of the same.
I take on board your point about the fact that junior explorers need capital. As you grow your cash position, is that something you may look to do as a capital allocation strategy, seeding some money into juniors to make the next discovery?
Yeah, and that is a discussion that we're happy that we've graduated as a company to have those discussions, and that is a discussion that we're having. Primarily, how could we make investments in teams that have good prospects that we might want to be a part of in the future. We would take our example from companies like Agnico Eagle, who invested in us in a similar sort of fashion. So we could play a role in that to a more modest level. We could play a role in that if we thought that kind of agreement would result in us being part of a discovery, which would be to the benefit of Orla shareholders, and us potentially having an inside track to owning that asset so that we could eventually build it, because we are mine builders, but spreading our cash around to create more discovery that our shareholders could also benefit from, and giving us access to more construction projects in the future would be certainly something that we'd consider now that we're at that cash generative level.
Interesting, and interesting times. Jason Simpson, thank you very much for joining us today.
Okay, thank you, Paul.
And we have a lot more to come from the 2024 Gold Forum Americas from Colorado Springs. So hit that subscribe button to see all our videos. I'm Paul Harris, and this is Kitco Mining.
Kitco Mining's special coverage of Gold Forum Americas is brought to you by Metalla Royalty.